Excellent, thank you. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the session entitled Data for AI, Unlocking Impact, Reproducibility, and Trust. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada, which is situated on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. My name is Lee Wilson. I'm the Director of Research Data Management at the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, and I'll be your moderator for this exciting and timely session. So, as many of you know, the success of high-impact AI applications, especially critical in areas like healthcare and life sciences, depends heavily on the accessibility, integrity, and quality of the underlying data. So today we're going to hear from two emerging researchers who are working on some of the most pressing data challenges in this space, from ensuring reproducibility in research to enabling groundbreaking innovations like AI-powered diagnostics and protein folding. So here's what our agenda will look like for today. We'll begin with two presentations, each followed by about 5 minutes of Q&A. Then we'll move into a 30-minute moderated discussion where I'll invite you to participate either by submitting questions through the chat or using the raise hand feature, and I'll be monitoring the chat throughout. And finally, I'll wrap things up with a few concluding thoughts. So with that, why don't we jump right in? Please join me in welcoming our first presenter, Julia Raffaella De Luca. Julia graduated with a master's degree in biomedical engineering, specialized in innovative technologies and diagnostics in therapy from the University of Bologna in March 2023. Julia is a PhD student in the Health and Technology program at the Department of Electronic and Information Engineering, and her research project focuses on the integration of artificial intelligence in lung cancer screening. So welcome, Julia. I'll invite you to share your slides and give your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee, for the introduction. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
I'm sharing. Okay. So, good evening to everyone, and I'm glad to introduce this session. I will hopefully underline the need to have curated, high quality, and available data. So, let's just jump into my presentation, which is entitled Beyond the Algorithm, Data's Role for Trustworthy AI in Healthcare. So here I just wanted to show you what is the trend of publication that try to use AI for lung cancer. And as you can see that in the last 20 years globally, the number of publications is increased very much, almost exponentially. But what is this little red rectangle that we see? It is actually the number of FDA-approved devices related to lung cancer. So you imagine that this gap, this huge gap between the number of total publications and the number of approved FDA devices based on AI for lung cancer is really expressing the wasted potential of AI in lung cancer screening. So that's why we should revert back to the AI development and find what is at the source of this problem, what is impeding our systems, our AI systems in translating into the clinic. And that's why we have to look to data. So here's what we'll see in this short talk. We will see what I'm doing in my PhD project about AI for lung cancer screening, and then we'll see the need for standardization that we addressed in this project, and we will also see the issues about quantity and quality of data that are some of the causes impeding the clinical translation we've seen before, not only lung cancer screening, but I would say across healthcare. So lung cancer, according to the WHO organization, this report is from the 2022, is the main cause of cancer-related death worldwide in men and women of all ages. And you see here, here are reported the absolute numbers in millions of number of incident cases and deaths for different kind of cancers of different districts. And you can see that the lung cancer is the more frequent and also the deadliest worldwide, with more than 2 million cases. And screening with low-dose computed tomography demonstrated a 20% lung cancer mortality reduction. With this first study, this huge study, the National Lung Screening Trial in the US that was conducted almost 20 years ago, they saw that besides tobacco control policies that would represent the most efficient intervention in reducing lung cancer-related death, screening is efficient too in reducing lung cancer death, and the screening with low-dose computed tomography, that is a special computed tomography with a reduction in the X-ray dose delivered to the patient. So it is adapt to a screening program in which we don't want to harm the subjects enrolled in the program. This is why in screening programs we target at-risk but asymptomatic population, just to find the disease at an early stage where it can be treated better. And that's why we don't want to harm the patient with unnecessary radiations. And then this high-risk population is selected by means of age and smoking behavior criteria. So with this study, they found that that criteria combined with low-dose computed tomography led to a 20% reduction in lung cancer mortality. So if we have the selection criteria and if we have the intervention, why we don't have national screening programs for lung cancer, as we have for breast, uterus, and colon cancer? This is because lung cancer screening is not perfect yet. We have not found the best strategy. It in fact proved, the National Lung Screening Trial, but also other trials in Europe, that it is characterized by a high overdiagnosis rate of the tests that were positive for lung cancer. The 96% was not confirmed for lung cancer with further investigations like biopsies or other imaging, so other radiations. So you can see how this can be harmful for these subjects and also suboptimal for the overall health system. And also the cohort selection was suboptimal because the first cause of death in the screening trial was not lung cancer, but cardiovascular disease, followed by lung cancer, that is the target cause of death in the screening intervention, and respiratory disease. These are the big three killers of tobacco smoking behavior. But if we want to find the people that are at risk of lung cancer, ideally we wanted to find only who dies of lung cancer, not of other causes. So we need to personalize the screening program. We need to refine the screening criteria in order to improve the benefit to risk ratio for the patients and the involved subjects. And that's why we thought of AI to solve this problem. So by identifying hidden patterns in large screening populations on big data, we want in my PhD project, we want to develop a deep learning framework for personalized post-test risk stratification in lung cancer screening. I will not delve into the project because it's not the core of this talk today, but I wanted to show you that everything starts from the data sets. And if we want to exploit the artificial intelligence ability to autonomously find patterns in the data, we need to feed it with much data. This is the payoff we had. And that's why we decided to work with NLST dataset, because it's the largest existing and publicly available dataset of these sites for this problem. We have 53,000 subjects enrolled, and half of them has performed computed tomography. And for this half, we have the computed tomography images publicly available. It's 15 terabytes of data. And since they were collected in 33 screening sites across the United States with machines from 4 manufacturers and many screening protocols, you can see how this very big data had very small standardization and was very difficult to be managed. So we decided to build on our neuroimaging experience that we have in our lab and decided to extend BEADS to CT. What is BEADS? The Brain Imaging Data Structure is a community-driven standard that was born some years ago to find a standard structure for neuroimaging data to make them more fair, so more findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And then, as you can see here in this picture, we moved from a folder that appears to have some structure, but where the names of the folders and the file names are not informative at all. And you can imagine if we want to build AI on this, we have to carefully find a way to manage these namings to select the proper image for our study. While in the BEAD structure on the right side, you can see that we have meaningful names and structures. So we have different imaging modalities. So one folder for each modality, one folder for each subject. The names are standardized, so it's easy for people from another lab or also to develop code that use this data set to actually interpret and use them. So it is easy to build knowledge on this. And we did it on a subset of 5,000 subjects. And this was the structure. I'm showing only 2 subjects for simplicity. This was the structure we had before the conversion. So you see very long names with very uninformative sequences. And this is the folder as it appears after the conversion. So you can see we had half of the directories we had before. The data is the same, but we just have it organized differently. Actually, the images are not more in DICOM format, but in nifty format that is easier to handle. It carries less metadata, so everything is compact and both human and machine readable better than before. And having standardized data actually foster us to move to an application, a standard application. BEADS, in fact, the BEADS community has also developed the BEADS app structure. So these apps accept BEADS as input and give us BEADS data, BEADS compliant data as output. And the standardization of these apps not only comes from the standardization of the input and output data, but they are made in such a way that we have also reproducibility of these apps across platforms, because they are based on Docker and Singularity containerization. So we can carry these apps both on portable computers or servers, thanks to Docker and Singularity respectively. So we don't have to care about the hardware and the operating system and the dependencies our app is running on, because it is containerized. So we've seen up to now that standardization enables democratization. We have to sustain this curation effort to move from raw data, so to our observation, to knowledge that is the ultimate core of research and of science. But standardization is not enough to have fair AI. To have fair AI, we also need to care about some intrinsic properties of data that are quantity and quality. And that's why we are talking today. We want to foster accessibility and fairness of data. And I will show you how these aspects actually impact and keep artificial intelligence in papers out of the clinics. We have to think about AI model as a car engine. We need both data quantity and data quality. Data quantity is like the air without data, without a sufficient volume of data, our engine cannot even start. So we need oxygen, we need the oxidizer to make our engine run. But we also need fuel, and that is data quality. And we need good quality fuel to make our engine not clog. So to drive our innovation, to drive AI from paper to clinic, we need a robust engine, but we also need the air and the fuel to make it drive far and to make innovation. The first experiment is an experiment I ran on my personal computer, so really an easy one, where I trained a gradient boosting model that is a state-of-the-art model for classification and regression on the tabular datasets. And I used it to, given tabular like demographics and clinical data from some NLST participants, have as output their probability of developing lung cancer. And I did it for different sizes of the training sample. So of the, from 7,060 subjects to 760 subjects to 7,050 and 5,000 subjects. And the thing that is interesting to see is that not only here you can see on the x-axis the training sample size, and on the y-axis the area under ROC curve, that is a metric typically used in AI to evaluate AI models. And the more this metric is near 1, the better the model is at classification. And as you can see here, the mean area under the ROC curve increases as we increase the training sample size. So it's like when we study more for a test. The more we study, the better we are in the test score. But the other phenomenon that we should see is that the confidence band, so the confidence of the model, also decreases as the training sample size increases. So with more data, we have generally better performance, but also better reliability of our model. So we move from randomness in the performance of the model to certainty. And this is very important because sometimes people just have one good score and publish with that. But then that score is not reproduced in the clinic, and this gives a useless model. And then the second example that to demonstrate the importance of data quality and variability comes from a real model developed by Google in 2016 for the detection of diabetic retinopathy in retinal fundus photographs. This model was trained on high-quality curated fundus images, and it achieved more than 90% of accuracy, sometimes comparable or higher to ophthalmologists. So with these very good results, Google decided to study how this model performed in the clinic. The major problem this model had was that it rejected more than 20% of images due to quality mismatch. This meant that for different kinds of issues in the real world, in the real clinics, like poor lighting conditions to take the fundus photographs, or different protocols. Some nurses did some procedures before the photos, some others did not. And also for different machines to take the photos for different circumstances, real-world circumstances, the model refused to process that photos to give the score. And these people were referred to an ophthalmologist, not because they need to always be seen by an ophthalmologist because they were suspected for diabetic retinopathy, but just because the model wasn't capable of processing that lower quality images that still could be processed by an actual ophthalmologist. So here, what we want to stress is that when the data on which the model is trained on does not reflect the real context in which the model will be deployed once in the real world, then we have something that is almost unuseful, that cannot make an impact in the real world. You have to know that most of these people just refused to reach out to an ophthalmologist because it was too far from their home. So actually, we have to care about quantity and quality to make our systems have an impact. And here again, to stress the data journey to trustworthy AI, what are the steps we have to take on our data? The first thing is that we have to characterize our data. So we have to know the quantity, the quality, and the basic statistics. We have to know if our data has the sufficient statistical power to carry out our analysis and to develop our model. Then we need to cure this data in order to be better for the development of our systems, but possibly also to be interoperable and to build the knowledge on the data by standardization and curation to and foster also the sharing with other researchers and other labs. That is actually the ultimate step that ensures that we have a trustful system, and then others can build a trustful system, because if we share our data, then our lab, our other labs, other researchers will have data to externally validate their system. And so they will have a better performance, a better prediction of how the model will behave in the real world, if their model will have an impact. So if we would remember the metaphor I did before as the AI as a car engine, once we have this air and once we have the fuel, then we hopefully can drive our models from paper to the clinic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia, for that fantastic presentation. We have about 7 minutes for questions. So people, please feel free to post your questions in the chat or use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask directly. And just while I give people a few moments to think about questions, I do have, well, actually, no, I'm noticing a few hands right away. So why don't we jump right in? Um, Girdhar, you're
Yes. So, so one of the things that we are learning in these foundation models, which are being trained on lots and lots of data, is that that we don't have to rely on the data quality as much as in the prior days of machine learning. I don't know how much you're familiar with the notion of inductive bias. So, especially in the biotech and the healthcare industry, there is a lot of inductive bias that we infuse into these machine learning models, uh, which is another way of saying that we humans have a certain way of viewing data, and our views could be infused into these models. And machine learning models with a lot of inductive bias could benefit from little data to train these models. Whereas if you have lots and lots of data, then you don't have to induce as much bias and let the models get trained and find patterns in those models, which is one of the reasons why these large language models, although it is being trained on lots of incoherent data, is somewhat coherent. So I wonder what your thoughts on with regard to if you have lots and lots of cancer related data, is it okay to not stress on the point of high data quality? We still want some quality data because we want to still extract the patterns that are of interest to us. But is data quality that big of a requirement if you have lots and lots of data? It could be that we don't have lots of data, so that's fine. But if we do have lots of data, do we have to stress the point of quality as much?
Thank you. Thank you. This is actually a really interesting question. I would say that we still have to care about quality. Uh, I mean, what I would maybe I not stress that much is that in the Google example, in the Google study, the fact that they have not used let's say more real world data. Just it's not that we have to develop systems that are trained on low quality data. I mean, we have to care about the context. So we have to train nurses if we need to, if they have to perform this kind of procedures, because I mean, having an AI system does not, I mean, the real world data issue does not mean that we are allowed to be as not professional as we should be. So the healthcare professionals have to be professional in order to collect the best data that they can. But I mean, in real life, there may be some other issues that can, let's say, harm this quality. And we have to take care of it when developing not only the AI algorithm, but the AI system if we want to move it into the clinic. Moving to your question, as I was saying, I think we always have to care about data, also because especially in large language models, but also in as we have seen in national lung screening trial dataset, even if they are big, and even if they are, let's say, very, we have very really high combination of acquisition protocols and reconstruction kernels. So we have images obtained differently. So our model actually is supposed to generalize well. Actually, the model is not generalizing well, because there are too many things that we have to disentangle. So I think that in any case, we should not forget to evaluate the quality. We have to be conscious of what we are putting inside the model, because these data, even if huge, are biased in some ways that maybe we cannot see perfectly at the beginning. So I think we should always care to be like to interpret also the model decision, because in a high stake field like healthcare, we cannot just make a bunch, feed the model with a bunch of data and get with that. So I think that in any case, maybe we are less, let's say, I mean, worried, but we have to, in any case, both in small and the large models.
All right, thanks. Yeah, and then we have to worry about batch effects because of the differences in protocols and whatnot. I understand. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and then Katie, I see yours in the chat, so I'll ensure that it gets raised during the discussion section. Sun Young, I see your hand.
Thank you. In AI has some limitation in terms of accessing data. So for example, the restricted data set, which is often the case for human-derived data set, AI cannot access it. It raised the bar in a high barrier. So what I'm concerned about is the data used to train AI model might not be as inclusive as it should be, therefore leading to bias. So how do we overcome that hurdle?
Yeah, this is also a really huge and great question, a really huge issue to be resolved, because it's something that is intrinsic in the data collection. So it's something that should be, let's say, referred to the stakeholders, to the healthcare ministries or whatever agency should be aware of that. Developing AI on data just puts more light on the issue, I think, because anyone is talking about this. I see I mean, besides something that can be done only by a policymaker to assess equity in healthcare access and therefore equity in data sets representativeness, I think one of the working strategies could be the use of synthetic data. So we can use synthetic data to, let's say, artificially augment our data set and have, let's say, a more equitable representation of each group, whatever the label we want to augment. Let's say in healthcare, for example, we always have a low number of positives, fortunately, and a high number of negative. But this also is a huge bias in our model, because if our model always says no, maybe it can seem performing, but actually it's not good at identifying real positive people. And this can also be for ethnic minorities. So the thing is that to develop good synthetic data, we need at the beginning one good actually representative data set. So I hope that we can collect as many data and that the healthcare agency and everyone could actually take this observation that is actually true. The data are biased, whatever data we have, and they should use this to foster sharing and availability.
Yeah, synthetic data is a great way to go about it, and the clone is one of them. But you have to validate that the synthetic data gives the same results as real data. So that's another hurdle right there. But it is a good alternative. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Great, thank you for the excellent questions, and thank you again for the fantastic presentation, Julia. I think we're off to a really great start. So why don't we move on to our second speaker then? Our next presenter is Gavin Michael Farrell. Gavin is a PhD candidate at the University of Padova and a member of Elixir Italy. He is researching machine learning best practices for the life sciences to advance transparent and reproducible machine learning. He has a strong background in the life sciences with a bachelor's degree in biotechnology and a master's in bioinformatics from the University of Galway, Ireland. After his initial studies, he worked at the Elixir Europe Hub in Cambridge, UK, an organization focused on aligning pan-European bioinformatics efforts through collaborative projects such as the Genomic Data Infrastructure. He has been involved in several international initiatives working to advance open science, such as the European Open Science Cloud and Elixir Research Data Alliance Focus Group. Welcome, Gavin, and I'll invite you to share your screen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let me get this up. And I presume this is showing okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Julia, for an excellent talk to get us started, and Lee for the lovely introduction. Gavin Farrell from University of Padova, and I'll be talking about the challenges and building blocks for a machine learning ecosystem, closely related to my work on machine learning best practices and the stuff that we're doing at Elixir Europe. So to mention, we had this Research Data Alliance AI in Action workshop, which acted as a precursor to this main plenary. And this happened in February 2025, where I went into a lot of detail on life science machine learning publishing crisis and the DOME registry solution from Elixir and the DOME recommendations. But I'll give a brief recap of that and then move into the wider look of the different components of the machine learning ecosystem and what we can do to get better guided pathways to inform machine learning life science best practices. So life science machine learning, in recent years, there's been a massive boom in the application of machine learning to life science grand challenges. This has been spurred on twofold reasons. So firstly, the availability of powerful hardware, such as GPUs, TPUs, and so on, and also the FAIR initiative having wild success in life sciences, leading to a huge amount of high quality FAIR biodata. This has led to landmark successes for life science challenges. And the key one I want to point out is the AlphaFold one, which solves the challenge of protein structure prediction for folding of proteins. So with protein sequences, they code into specific amino acids, which come in this long chain. but then need to fold into these very complex structures, as you can see on the right. And AlphaFold solved this huge challenge of accurately being able to do this for most cases. The significance of this in the life sciences is that they were awarded, these guys who did the AlphaFold work, the Nobel Prize for Chemistry late last year. So it's been a landmark success for machine learning in the life sciences. As a result of this has spurred on others in the life sciences domain to start applying machine learning to their own work. This graph here is a keyword match of machine learning in papers from the Europe PMC Life Science Literature Database. So this shows the past 20 years up to 2024. And as you can see, not all of these will be machine learning methods papers, but machine learning has seen a huge growth in life science literature, as demonstrated most recently by the 2024 figures, where there's around 85,000 new papers mentioning machine learning in 2024 alone. So as you can imagine, a huge amount of methods papers are also in that stack. However, this has led to a machine learning publishing crisis in the life sciences, the issue being that there's very many poorly described machine learning methods papers. And again, I even saw some discussion in the chat of the Zoom chat before where this was being highlighted about these rubbish in, rubbish out kind of papers and not the best described machine learning methods. But to put this into context, then, if you were to go into a store and you wanted to buy a snack, being a yogurt, and you had two options presented in front of you, and one was very well marked up. It had the ingredients, the best before date, the nutritional information, and the other one sat beside it has absolutely nothing on it. You might ask yourself what kind of attributes such as the reproducibility, transparency, and trustworthiness of the product is. And putting this back into the context then of this example of the life sciences, you would have to make the decision of this transparency, trustworthiness, and reproducibility, but there's no frameworks in place for machine learning publishing, no regulations or mandates for having this transparency as there are for foodstuffs. Elixir came along then and had the idea to put together some recommendations and guidelines to help transparency and reproducibility for machine learning literature publishing. These are called the DOME recommendations, and this is an acronym for covering the areas of disclosure for data, optimization, model, and evaluation. And this covers areas, for example, in data, such as the data splits disclosure to avoid data leakage and highlight the test and training splits. The optimization, making sure that there's clear disclosure of what kind of algorithms were used in the papers, be it convolutional neural networks, random forests, or so on. The model aspects, such as the software availability, are there any links to GitHubs and so on. And then for evaluation aspects, you could be looking at things such as comparison to simpler benchmarks, or using standardized benchmark data sets to back up claims of data of accuracy of your models. So this disclosure set has been set up by Elixir Europe to help advance life science publishing disclosure, supporting reproducibility and transparency of the methods going into these publications. Building on this, Elixir Europe funded this DOME registry service that we're working on at the University of Padova, and also with colleagues from Elixir Greece, which allows you to mark up and annotate your machine learning methods publications in the registry and share those methods in a standardized template using the DOME disclosure areas. So we have over 200 entries so far, and seeing how it actually works and what kind of data then you can find. So directly corresponding to your publication, if it's been annotated, marked up, and deposited in the registry, you have the 4 areas disclosed, as you can see on the top left tab: the dataset, optimization, model, and evaluation. And this is the optimization tab. And you can clearly see that here it's a convolutional neural network that was described in the paper, and that's been disclosed. And then at the end, you get a final scoring on this, which shows the different areas that have been covered. You lose a mark if there's obviously no disclosure on those and the field is left empty. So it's a rough approximation of how transparent and reproducible and trustworthy that the methods are to those disclosures. Building upon this, as I've given this talk in the first Research Data Alliance AI in Action workshop, and then further in the AI Data Visitation workshop during this plenary, I'll be looking at the wider ecosystem, as I mentioned, so putting into the context of machine learning challenges and building blocks and how this all comes together in a machine learning ecosystem that can guide researchers. There's a lot of icons and services that I reference in this, but most of them do have hyperlinks that you can click on if you get the slides from my ORCID, and which are linked from Zenodo as well, and I'll share them in the chat also. So machine learning ecosystem, what am I kind of talking about ecosystems in this in this sense. A simple analogy looking at Lego, it's a great example of a highly interoperable ecosystem. It consists of building blocks, which could be called components, and then there's many different instruction sets bringing you to different specific outputs. Looking in the context of our machine learning ecosystem, that we have many different components, such as model and dataset registries and databases containing information on machine learning methods. You have different metadata and standards and toolings getting towards your machine learning outputs. There's also then many different pathways that can be followed. These are less well covered, but there are some, such as the DOME recommendations for disclosure, supporting reproducibility and transparency. There's the FAIR for Machine Learning group of the RDA. They've put together a life cycle of machine learning that can be followed. But again, there's nothing quite overarching pulling all of these together in a single nice place or package as a cohesive ecosystem, and they're not very interoperable, the components that exist within them at this moment in time. But looking at the machine learning ecosystem, kind of the needs of what could be done in this space, and some already established examples across the life sciences, at least, that there's been quite a lot of effort in different ones that could be analogous to what the machine learning ecosystem could look like. Well, who's the target that these pathways and guidelines should be kind of looking towards and highlighting all these different components? Well, data generators would be the ones that I would say. And especially they're the ones producing this data, commonly applying computational methods to their machine, using machine learning is becoming much more accessible with generative AI. And there's this whole recent trend of vibe coding where people literally don't even touch a keyboard and they're talking to their computer to produce code. And it's becoming much more accessible to actually do machine learning methods. So we should be helping guide these folk with the data who might be looking to apply it. And then, of course, that percolates up to those who are more on the computer science side, applying it in more advanced ways. Established ecosystems that I'd like to highlight as well, which people will be quite familiar with, especially in the Research Data Alliance, is the FAIR data ecosystem and research data management ecosystem. There's many different components, just pulling out two simple ones here, but for both of these quite applicable, the FAIR sharing registry, which highlights databases, standards, and policies, help guide people with deposition and FAIR data. And then Data Stewardship Wizard, which is a tool for producing research data management plans. And then correspondingly, there's these overarching kind of pathway hubs, such as the Research Data Management Kit, supporting research data management, and the FAIR Cookbook supporting FAIR data work and guiding researchers. There's also more recently work started on the EOSC-verse project for software quality kind of ecosystem, as I'd like to also call it, as it's quite analogous to the other two, where they're putting together a research software quality kit. So then looping back into the machine learning ecosystem, and I'm going to contextualize it in, well, I suppose the challenges and different components that exist in this space. These are not all of the different challenge areas, but there's three key ones that I'll highlight today. So reusability, reproducibility, and sustainability. My definitions may differ to kind of what people expect in this space, but again, they're broad areas that I'll be discussing for these challenges. So in the aspect of reusability and looking at machine learning reuse, well, I'd look at it as the ability to create machine learning methods from existing machine learning software and data sets made possible by the availability of virtually described and accurate data and metadata on the currently existing methods. So being able to reuse them and return value of those existing methods. But there's many issues and barriers in this space. So current issues include there's a low amount of sharing and deposition of all of the related data sets, code, and models. There's, again, a very low use of machine learning registries, which are specifically tailored to help share these different research objects, which reduces the lack of findability, blocking reuse. And additionally, there's very little use and generation of machine learning specific metadata, which might help support finding these methods and data sets, so the models and data sets. And additionally, there's a lot of poor documentation and disclosure to help facilitate reuse, even if the components are available, making it hard to reuse existing methods described in publications or shared in different places. But there are very many solutions that do exist. And again, these are not a comprehensive one, but just to highlight and pull out a couple of them that can be used to address some of these issues in the ecosystem. So for example, for reuse, what would really help if there's a better use of machine learning specific registries for depositing model research objects and data set research objects, machine learning specific data sets, that is. not just the original data sources, which might already be hosted in FAIR databases. And there exists, I suppose, somewhat of a challenge, but there's almost too much of a choice to a certain degree, as you have these domain agnostic ones, such as Kaggle and Hugging Face, which can accept from all different domains. And then there's also domain specific ones, which I've pulled out some life science examples for depositing machine learning models and data sets. So biomodels, which is a biological modeling database, has been making efforts in the space to host machine learning relevant models and data sets, but also for bioimaging specifically, the bioimage models who exist for hosting these research objects and are tailored for life science examples. But even just simply using these and introducing those and seeing them linked from publications more often would be quite useful. Then for correctly documenting all of the methods and data sets and everything else, well, using GitHub or GitLab closer to the code and making sure that they are quite readable, accessible, and well annotated would be quite useful to help support reuse. But then, of course, as I mentioned, the DOME registry solution for a standardized disclosure of the different methods and helping support reuse as well would really help on the documentation side. And those components exist and can be used today, but don't see it as well used as they could be. Additionally, for generating metadata, so researchers should start looking at these new standards. These may not be the ones that ultimately trump in the end, but they're quite nice ones, such as for machine learning data sets. There's a metadata standard called Croissant from Machine Learning Commons, which is a global organization working in the space to help share and find and reuse machine learning data sets. And then from our own Research Data Alliance, there's the Interest FAIR4ML group, the Interest group, that have put together recently a schema for model metadata sharing. So all of these different components would help the reusability challenge that exists in this space currently and can be used already today. Moving further then into the challenge of reproducibility, looking at machine learning reproducibility is, I suppose, and how I would define it, is the ease of being able to re-implement it and do the full run of the method from start to end with all of the components when they are available for reuse. And what currently barriers a lot of reproducibility in the machine learning space is that there is low use of containers and environment control. So even if you go to these GitHubs and they're linked and a lot of the research objects are there to be able to reuse the method, containers and environment control is quite often overlooked, meaning that it's not very transferable across systems and you have to jump through hoops to get it to actually run on your own machine and re-implement it and reproduce it. There's additionally a low use of workflow management systems, which are incredibly powerful ways of chaining together multiple tools and different steps of machine learning, which you could help get these start to end runs and reproduce the whole machine learning method in a more simpler way, and instead of having to spend many time running different steps in separate disjointed ways. And then, of course, there's additionally a low sharing and deposition. Even if these are used by the researchers of all of these methods, they're not being put in places to make them findable and shareable. And additionally, all the relevant configs for their own systems, which might help others and inform them of how to reuse them and reproduce the machine learning methods themselves. The components for the reproducibility, so a lot of these are life science oriented ones, so there might be a lot of other ones, but the life sciences and bioinformaticians especially have been quite focused on this for solving these issues and solutions in this space. So it's quite a nice cohesive set of components that could be used to help sort the reproducibility issues, and could maybe see expanded into the machine learning domain, that it becomes a standard that all of these components are being used to help support reproducibility. So, for example, the use of containers, there's different container softwares to help run different computational methods across different systems, such as Docker and Podman. And further, for environment control, making sure dependencies work together when they're put together in these different containers, such as Conda and Mamba. For workflows and workflow management systems, as they're referred to, there is an absolute plethora of these. There's so many of them. I've pulled out 3 common ones in the life sciences. So Nextflow, SnakeMake, and Galaxy. Galaxy being quite a nice user-friendly one that can help support reproducibility. And then additionally, for sharing and making available all of these components, the containers, the environment control, and workflows are equally as important so that they get out there and can be reused. So there's various workflow registries, and one of the key ones being Workflow Hub, which is workflow management system agnostic to help share these. There's container hosting services such as Docker Hub or biocontainers, which can host life science specific ones. And then, of course, putting all the related configs and files on your GitHubs or GitLabs or wherever you're hosting your code is also quite important to help reproducibility. The last challenge I'll talk about in the machine learning kind of ecosystem, the components we have for it, is machine learning sustainability. And this is a growing cause for concern, but there are components, thankfully, to help answer this. And machine learning sustainability, I would somewhat define as when you're creating a new machine learning model or method, considering the corresponding environmental impact of this and the approach that you take when doing so. So currently there's a lot of issues with low measuring of machine learning methods sustainability. So be it CO2 equivalence, energy use, and so on. There's very little measurement of any sort. And I know it's difficult to know what to measure, but even measuring anything would be a start. And then what is measured, when it does get measured, there's rare reporting back of this. It's rare to find it in a machine learning methods paper or otherwise to actually find this kind of information, except maybe at the very large scale in the large language models level with the industry folk. You get more of a vibe for this, but especially not in the life sciences. You would rarely come across this in a paper or other places being reported. And then there's also a low application and promotion of green ML or efficient ML methods, which could also help reduce these impacts that the methods might be having on energy use and environmental impact down the line. And I did add this slide in this morning, actually, because this was a headline, and AI needs a lot of energy. Trump says coal is the answer. So to power our data centers, if we're going towards powering them with coal, it's a bit of a concern and seemingly a growing one. So sustainability for the components of a solution, which again, I'm less familiar with these ones, but I found there's quite a bit actually out there and work in this space. So firstly, for being able to adopt green ML software approaches, there's services and kind of registry hubs where there's green software patterns, green algorithms, which kind of provide guidance on how to take a more green approach to your machine learning methods. Then for actively just taking the opportunity to measure what the impact might be, there's active tracking. So you can deploy this alongside your code, is why I call it active tracking. So code carbon and ML CO2 impact could be quite useful. And then for predictive tracking, which is much simpler, but just putting in the parameters, how long your runs are, what kind of chips you're using, and so on, you can get a rough estimate. And finally, for being able to report your measures, this is an area where there's not too many solutions, but I did find that there are certain initiatives such as dedicated leaderboards, but they're not very well used, such as the Reinforcement Learning Energy Leaderboard. But for existing benchmarking initiatives where they're sharing results on accuracy, F1 scores, and other aspects like this, we could maybe look to opening up, again, sustainability aspects and reporting on this. But also simply, if you have measured it, try and put it in a supplementary file or mention it somewhere in your paper. It might also be quite useful so we can start getting to grips with how impactful these areas are in machine learning. Pulling this all together and looking at machine learning kind of an ecosystem way, well, there's a lot of components of which we need to promote awareness, reuse, code development and interoperability for in these areas, but there's also different challenge areas where there's probably many other solutions. But one of the things I'd like to highlight as well that is becoming of growing importance is the machine learning metadata components helping reuse. So the more that these start getting used and these get generated for machine learning models and data sets, the more infrastructure adoption we'll hopefully see and help support interoperability between these different registries and components in supporting the machine learning ecosystem. But additionally, looking towards the pathway aspect, could we maybe start looking at dedicated spaces in the research software kit or DM kit, looking at the machine learning data set side of things, or the machine learning model software side of things, and seeing where we could house dedicated pathways and build these together. But that's no arbitrary task as well. In Elixir, we are quite closely looking at this through our machine learning focus group. In June 2025, we'll have a workshop looking at the ecosystem in Elixir specifically, and hopefully the wider life sciences. And we also are charting different ecosystem components. Again, this expands a bit further into even organizations working on standards and toolings and so on. And but we also are covering resources, registries, everything else like that. And I think as of today, we've over 140 of these, but we'll hopefully get these curated and released in some format soon to help co-inform people what's out there and what different components there are in the machine learning space, helping researchers to do it in the best way possible. Some final takeaways on DOME and the machine learning ecosystem. As I mentioned, there's many components highly applicable for all domains for the most part, but we do need a cohesive collection of guiding pathways to support our researchers in the space. Cross-domain components expansion for those that aren't highly applicable for all domains. So I must say that DOME and the DOME registry are very tailored to the life sciences at the moment, but we're considering this RDA Tiger adoption call and maybe expand it to another few outputs from different research data alliance groups that we could put together for one of these to help support and make it more domain agnostic and cohesive. But we also need to start building then further dialogue with the organizations that are working on these standards. So the FAIR4ML group, with the RDA Machine Learning Commons as well, which is a global group. And finally, just that we need to start seeing more artificial intelligence, machine learning stakeholder engagement across funders, policymakers, and publishers to help address these challenges and influence researcher behavior so we can see a better ecosystem of outputs and people being able to use such services as highlighted. I'd just like to highlight and thank my professor, Silvio Tisato, my main PI, and Omar as well from our group, who's been working on the DOME registry tirelessly putting that together. And of course, the Elixir folk on the machine learning focus group, Fotis and Leila, who also co-lead that group. If you're interested in adopting DOME, I'll share my slides, but we have some leaflets and our contact address. So if you're a publisher especially, please do reach out. Thank you very much, and you can as well get the slides there through Zenodo, and I'll stop the screen share.
Another excellent talk. Thanks so much, Gavin. So we have about 3 minutes for questions for Gavin, and so again, feel free to post in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to jump in. And maybe just while folks are thinking. So again, thank you for that wonderful talk. I just want to touch on machine learning registries for a moment. So machine ML registries hosting data sets obviously can be of great value to researchers, but the data may not be well curated, and there may be an element of trust that's lacking, which, as we've heard from both talks, is extremely important for data and AI. So how can this potential weakness facing machine learning resources be improved for researchers, in your opinion? Oh, is Gavin still with us?
Hi, Lee. Did my thing completely go offline?
Yes, it did. Okay.
How you get
Welcome back.
along?
I'm glad you made it on so quickly. I wasn't sure if you dropped off or not. So I'm not sure if you heard that question, but I mean, maybe that's okay. There are also a couple other questions. So
Did you hear the full talk at least before that went down?
yes, we did. Yep.
Okay.
No, you completed the talk. So
Okay.
I'm glad that you're joining us from the iPhone. So that's okay. Well, why don't we open it up then to audience questions just for a bit? So Francis, I see you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. I hope you pose your question again because I thought it was a very good question. So thank you for that too. Gavin is, he's back again. Good. Gavin, I just wanted to ask you, what kinds of projects or steps do you take in Elixir with regard to data quality and data integrity?
Okay. So for the data quality aspect, I can speak from the Elixir perspective. There's been huge efforts through these kind of parallel subgroups called communities. They address different sub areas. So we have a plants community, we have intrinsically disordered protein communities, and a lot of these groups are working both within Elixir and externally on a global level on data standards. So for example, minimum information standards. So there's MIAPI, which is minimum information about plant phenotype, experiment information. We've MIADI, which targets other different ones. So the standardization side, which will help co-inform what data gets collected by the researchers, is very important. And then on the infrastructure side, there's a huge amount of curation work that goes on into making sure that there's quality data going into these knowledge bases. We have even a peer review process, the core data resources, which I think my colleague Fabio Liberante, who's on this call right now, it runs from Elixir. So our databases get peer reviewed. So that also helps with the data quality aspects. We give this then accreditation to these resources, which supports that. So both on the standard side and the infrastructure side, and making sure that we've good also dialogue and support with curation approaches for ensuring data quality and integrity controls are in place across the Elixir resources ecosystem. Is hopefully answers what was.
I just wanted to ask, do you use the Alcoa Plus or Alcoa Plus principles at all?
I've not come across them. You might be able to share, Francis, what they entail, and maybe I might be able to reflect a bit more on that specifically. But I know Fabio, is my colleague, might be on the call and able to answer on that as well. He's our data and interoperability platforms expert. So I might as well rely on him if he's here at the moment. But you could maybe explain, Francis, as well for me. Sorry.
To make it easy.
Thanks, Francis. We have one more hand. So Sun Young, I see your hand.
Thank you. I actually attended your talk during AI in Action things. This is the second time, but I really like this idea. And I do help a lot of researchers when they write a data management sharing plan. I see more and more, AI models. So I actually recommend this DOME thing. But my question is, there are existing, the repositories for AI models like Hugging Face, UC Irvine machine learning repository. Is there any like a synergistic collaboration between your registry and these existing repositories? Because they're still using DOI or they have their own thing, but I don't think it is the best aligned for machine learning, to be honest.
Yes, exactly. So definitely from our perspective on the DOME registry side, we've a lot of work towards interoperability ourselves. So it's one thing us saying that it's important, but we do need to work towards it. And it is one of our hopes and goals to get more interoperable with the ones who are hosting the machine learning data sets and the models themselves. So as you mentioned, Hugging Face and so on. So for example, we're looking towards how we can best expose, and especially, so I know Hugging Face has a specific section on papers, which would be of direct alignment that we could pull in from DOME, either send data back to them that they might be able to expose, or data that we could pull from them and expose. And then specifically on the models and data sets, we don't have any direct intentions to host them ourselves, but we do want to start building those cross links to where they are being put and deposited. So for example, when we curate a method entry for DOME, it's not explicitly there at the moment, but we do ask for where the software and data sets are. So if they are disclosed in the paper and we curate that paper, or the author curates it, they will be able to directly link back out to those sources of Hugging Face and so on. But we do want to build a better programmatic solution in place that we're not reliant on disparate curated entries, which there's a lot of free text. So we'll absolutely be working towards this. And one of the ways as well we're looking to align is the common adoption of those two metadatas I mentioned. So FAIR for ML, how we can start exposing that, and federating using the information between that, and then also the croissant standard, which is, I believe, being adopted by quite a few of the registries. I know through Machine Learning Commons, they have a lot of the folk who are moving away from these model cards, which are very human readable descriptions, into the more metadata, machine actionable, human and machine actionable metadata standards. So hopefully aligning over such aspects, but we're not there at the moment.
Yeah, hopefully it will come soon. So actually the GitHub is not, the reason GitHub kind of took took off because they integrate with the Zenodo, for example. So you can assign, DOI for a repository and stuff like that. So I can imagine, if you integrate with the Hugging Face or UC Irvine machine learning, and that will make this happen a lot quicker, somehow integrate with them. And Hugging Face does not issue DOI automatically. You have to request it. UC Irvine machine learning repository does. And open, Model Hub AI or OpenML, they have their own, PID system. So I'd like to see more harmonization in this field. And then this is a great way to do it. And hopefully you can integrate with all this existing, repository for machine learning and kind of standardize it. So that'd be awesome.
Exactly. Thank you so much for the suggestions, and as well, it's really valuable to know that interoperability is a focus point that people are looking towards, because that's what we're hoping to do and build upon.
Thank you.
Thank you for the excellent questions, and that was certainly one of my takeaways from Gavin's talk as well, is just how important interoperability is among tools for all of this in terms of supporting reproducible research with AI. So why don't we roll now into the open moderated discussion? We've sort of already started. So we've got a couple of questions that have come in through the chat, but why don't I start by posing a question, and then from there I'll try to incorporate questions from the chat as they come in, and also people feel free to raise hands as well. So both of your talks touch on sustainability and reproducibility, as well as reusability of existing tool sets. I'm just wondering, how can we ensure that the tools and frameworks that we build now will remain useful and usable into the future, especially across disciplines, so supporting cross-disciplinary research? And whoever wants to take, maybe Julia, you can start.
Yes. This is another big question, because most of the times what we see is that a project is raised, we get funds, but it has a duration, and then once the project expires, then you see these abandoned repositories, and you don't have any knowledge on the dependencies or whatever, so their work becomes completely irreproducible. So what I would say is that I like to think of a fair approach from the beginning. So even if we don't think of sharing, we can, I don't know, whatever, but we should always think about being fair from the beginning. So from the conceptualization of our study, and following every step, we have to document everything, because our brains are lazy, and I believe everyone has to fight its own lazy self, but we have to, because when you say, oh, I remember this later, I would say to my colleague this later, then everything, you forget everything, and then it's a matter of days. Imagine in years how huge this would be. So if I don't document a given choice or whatever. So I think that having always a fair approach, so grasping these principles, can surely set the base to make the project, let's say, sustain itself. Am I allowed to say this? Yeah, this is my approach generally.
So my thoughts on this one, looking at the sustainability and reusability of the different components. So actually there was a paper by some folk as well who were involved in the Research Data Alliance on Fair for AI, and they were highlighting different initiatives and resources. And actually, as I was going through it and curating that components list that I mentioned, the machine learning ecosystem one we're doing, many of those were already offline and not available. And this was within, I think, a 1 to 2 year period. So it's becoming a massive issue, the sustainability. And so I guess that having some, while there is a lot of registries of different services, having some redundancy there adds resilience, but aligning over interoperability and different aspects such as common standards and metadata can be quite useful. So if one does go down or doesn't get maintained, it doesn't leave as much of a hole. Additionally, I mentioned EOS Everest project. So they're putting together that RSQ kit. And one of the big components that will come out of that is looking at software sustainability. So there will be a lot of guiding efforts down that route. And additionally, opening up dialogue with developers, maintainers, and even the researchers who might be doing temporary projects, as Julia highlighted. There's funding for a certain period, and then it finishes up. But having that discussion from the start, some education might help in that space. And additionally, then trust frameworks as well, such as the Core Trust Seal, might be helpful for the larger registries and stuff, to help in different aspects. And I know from Elixir, we do peer review of our databases, but maybe for machine learning registries and stuff, something could be in place. And it helps flag gaps that might be coming with sustainability down the line.
Great, thank you for that. So I just want to continue then on this theme. So really what we've moved into now is the concept of reproducibility and how this is threatened by a lack of sustainability or reusability of these tools, or the concept of abandoned repositories being a risk, and some of the comments I'll note here in the chat also feed into this. So things like software curation and reusability being paramount to all of this. So a lot of times when we talk about reproducibility, we talk about code and models. But here we seem to be talking about something a little bit different with sustainability. I'm just wondering if you could speak to the most common data-related factors, in your opinion, that compromise reproducibility, and how we might start to address these systematically. And Julia, we can start with you.
Yes. I think that also sharing as a part in this, because when we there are many, let's say, raw publicly available data set, and what the research labs do is that each one does its own preprocessing and then does its own analysis. And then when we want to replicate the processing and analysis from a paper, sometimes we are not able to do this because of other, let's say, dependencies or some, let's say, missing documentation. So what I think is that if we kind of pre-process this data, why don't we share our pre-processed version so that data and their analysis can actually be reproduced? So I think that the key is always, I mean, again, documentation of what we do in the best way possible using metadata and the tools that Kevin has shown, because there are related tools and principles also for data, and also try to share the processed data itself. So I think that documentation and sharing here play a huge role, because everything we do on the data should be shared to others, also to make them try our same experiments. And yeah, basically.
Yes. So building upon, as you mentioned, so looking further into the data rather than the codes and models, well, one of the key areas that as well, there's a lot of kind of barriers within the life sciences is the sensitivity of the data, and especially any kind of healthcare data, as mentioned by Julia in her talk and other places. So reproducibility can be quite difficult then as a result of those restrictions around sensitive data. I know in the social sciences as well. So where possible, have it as open as possible, but as close as necessary. But I know as well, there's been a lot of work to support reproducibility and access to this important kind of healthcare sensitive data. So I know Francis's group with the AI data visitation group is working to help support that, so that people can access and get access to these data sets essential for reproducibility. And Elixir specifically, we have a lot of work going on with this EOSC and Trust project to support common interoperable trusted research environments, so people can analyze sensitive data sets. There's as well the Genomic Data Infrastructure Initiative to help with genomic data sharing, which would again help on the data supported reproducibility side of things. So that is one of the barriers I see with it, but solutions are hopefully coming down the route. And all of the points that Julia made on the best practices and metadata standards and stuff are again exactly I would echo those points, and she covered quite well.
Absolutely.
Yes,
So
if I can add like a little thing also, I mean, using standardization, as I mentioned, and also for harmonization, I mean, what we wanted to show with our bidsification of CT that it's not yet supported, it's just to show that, to prove that one can reuse what is done maybe on a different kind of data, on a different domain, just to not add, let's say, that just not to increase the entropy of this system. So, I mean, maybe I don't see perfect alignment with that standard or with that metadata schema, but then I can check if I can extend that metadata, because all of these initiatives are community driven. So I can ask to the people behind these initiatives, how can I do to take their standards, so to not increase the fragmentation of this field, just to highlight.
Excellent point. Thank you. So Julia, in your first response, you touched on curation, and Gavin, you touched on data sensitivity, which I do want to get back to. But we did have a question in the chat around data curation. So I'll raise that now. So Katie asks, it's important to invest human time and expertise in preparing trustworthy data. And this came out in different ways in both of your talks, and particularly in yours, Julia. So the question is, how does one best advocate for data curation, especially in the case of those who believe that tools like AI remove the need for human curation activities? So we'll start there, and I believe there was a follow-up in the chat as well on that point, but I'll have to find it. So we can start there.
Yeah, thank you again for all of these questions will drive for certain reflection. And I think that occasions like this, where we try to diffuse the best practices, are the best way to advocate for this kind of principles, because most of the time maybe these initiatives are not well, let's say, marketed. So we need things like RDA, like the virtual plenary, to make other researchers know about these tools. For example, most of the tools I knew thanks to Gavin presentations. So thanks for this opportunity. And I'm in the field, so you imagine, I mean, we see many things, so sometimes maybe we lose the attention on what really matters. And framing back to the question, and also I think that training since the beginning of researchers' career. So if we are, let's say, put into this way of thinking, way of doing the things, this becomes natural. So it's, let's say, very low effort to to adopt these best practices if we are exposed to them early in the research. To education, I mean, it's
So for highlighting the data curation, how important it is. So we actually do have quite a lot of work from Elixir on this, and specifically our lab as well. We've found it's a major gap for credit and recognition of these efforts. We've put together a resource which is integratable with different databases called APCuron, and this resource is actually supports cross-linking data curation activities at the database level and pushing and aggregating them back to people's ORCIDs so people can get credit and recognition. So we've been doing that through Elixir, and Elixir's been funding a lot of that work. So that's APCuron. Fabio might be able to put in the link, or someone else, for that one, as I don't have the chat. But then as well, so we've been doing quite a bit of engagement, specifically at the life science level. At, for example, the Biocuration Conference. There's a big, huge one that happens globally every year. And that's we've had quite a bit of engagement on the credit and recognition side in those spaces. So making sure that people feel recognized and recognized for their work. There's a lot of work, and people could probably speak to this, Francis, I believe, and others on Coara's work in this, which is the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment. So making sure that institutions are recognizing this work and the value of this work is quite important. I think there's also the DORA declaration that institutes can sign up to, and again helps support the recognition and help support curators themselves in their career pathways and keeps them in that space. But additionally, scalable curation is growing as a topic where these researchers are able to leverage scaling their curation approaches using AI. So it's not all bad in a sense where people are trying to replace them with it. They can do quite a bit quicker in that space at the moment now. And Elixir as well has a lot of focus on scalable curation approaches from SIB and others to help with database annotation and entries. So I guess it's a double-sided sword with artificial intelligence in this space, but I don't think they're going to be getting rid of the curators anytime soon.
No, thank you. Excellent answers. I really appreciate that, and particularly highlighting the importance of recognition of work in this space, and then how enablers like RDA can really help to support that. There's a really interesting question in the chat that I would like to highlight before we move on to a different topic. So Lindsay asks, is there a set of human-in-the-loop LLM standard curation guidelines as a deliverable from some of the working groups covering this space? So Julia, Gavin, I'm not sure if either of you are aware of any of those efforts.
I can't say that I'm aware, but so this is currently ongoing work, or sorry, maybe Julia.
I think it was a general question of this might be a good topic for an RDA group to cover. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not kind of into large language models at this level, so I'm not aware actually, but yes, it's really interesting.
Absolutely. Okay, so just changing gears a little bit. We've had some comments in the chat touching on this. Many healthcare data sets, as we know, are hard to access via AI due to appropriate privacy or policy constraints. So my question is, what are some promising approaches for responsible data sharing at scale in this space? And how can we balance the need for data privacy and security with the need for open, accessible data sets to support AI validation in healthcare, but that could be extended to other disciplines as well?
I think that we have to be aware of the ways we can share data in that safe way, because most of the times what I personally see from the healthcare institutions is just a no, like a talking with a wall. So just a no because it's simpler, okay, but then you keep some potential like wasted because you don't share the data, but just because you don't want to look for the way to share the data safely, because there are ways like let's say a closed access that can be done, or like there are some advancements on differential privacies or reinforcement learning. So on the other hand, there are let's say algorithms, AI techniques that by which we can train algorithms without sharing the data, and we can share the model parameters in a blockchain, so even the parameters are shared safely. So I think that also that we need some education, some formation at all the levels, just to make people know that we have strategies to share data in a privacy preserving way.
Definitely. I completely agree with what Julia was saying in that space. And so I think Julia touched upon the federated learning, which there's quite a lot of solutions coming into play with this, where you can analyze data on site without having to move or completely expose the data, which is one way of, especially in the machine learning sense of sharing this. I know NVIDIA, I saw a recent talk at the Machine Learning Commons on their NVIDIA Flare for federated learning, and they have a healthcare aspect to that. So there's some technical approaches coming into play with this. I know there's companies in Cambridge, specifically GenXT, which are working on federated learning solutions as well, and privacy preserving. I know the European Commission and EU have done quite a bit in the space, moving towards a health data space, EHDS, people might be aware of. I know in the Research Data Alliance as well, there's efforts on the Health Data Commons, breaking down the barriers towards sharing and being able to analyze and use this, and specifically as well highlighting the session that Patty and Francis on the AI data visualization birds of feather earlier this week with the Fairleys platform and solution is specifically looking at at some of this, of making most use of the sensitive data while preserving privacy. And again, I think there's ways to go, but hopefully things will get easier and it'll be solutions will start getting more cohesive and into the hands of the researchers, being able to fluidly share and reanalyze each other's data while preserving privacy.
Absolutely. And I'll also draw people's attention to the chat. There's some great conversations happening in the threads that are touching on it and reinforcing many of the points that are being made. So we are getting near the end of the session time, but we do have time for one more question for you both, and then we'll have to wrap up. So how can funders, journals, or institutions better support researchers in meeting transparency and data documentation standards like those raised in your talk, so in DOME or in BIDS?
I think that one of the main strategies, as binding with Kevin said about the recognition of the adoption of these best practices, is to include some requirements in the, let's say, journal guidelines or fundings, as for example is done in EU Horizon projects, where you are obliged to publish the related data. So I think that, and also as we've seen in some journals, you are obliged now to put, let's say, a data availability statement. So once you have to share the data, then you also, I expect that you are more aware of it and you curate more the data. So you make, let's say, implicitly more fair, even if you are not requested to, just because you know you will have to share it. So I think that more, let's say, request more importance on this matter, but both from funders and journals can foster and accelerate the adoption of these practices.
Yes, so specifically for DOME, looking at how we can better reach publishers and funders or institutions. Well, so we are going to very soon redo all of our main web pages with content on how journals can start to adopt into their publishing workflow the DOME recommendations. The solution has been designed specifically for journals to adopt, and hopefully we're going to make that more prominent. We do have GigaScience, the publisher has adopted for GigaScience Journal and Gigabyte into their publishing workflow. So we're hopefully going to share examples and stories from those and run workshops as well for that, for journals to help leverage DOME. Do get in contact with us. We're mapping out all of our steps and trying to make it a smooth process to adopt DOME into the workflow and the DOME registry. For funders, I do see eventually and hopefully, like, data management plans have become kind of quite significant from policymakers, and mandates and requirements that you can't just have your project without considering the data management aspect and making sure there's value and reuse. And eventually maybe something like DOME or an adapted version of DOME might become the standard that funders might also look for, to make sure that if you're doing AI methods, models and stuff, that you are disclosing all of this in a standardized way to help maximize the value for it. But we do need help, I suppose, reaching those and optimizing it so it works across all domains, not just the life sciences, and that funders can have something easy to help put in place in that space. And for institutions as well, we are looking how we can, kind of a signatories project, I suppose, for DOME, where you can sign up and say that your lab, if they're producing, or your institute, if they're producing AI models, methods, machine learning, that they'll also make a corresponding DOME registry entry. So that's how we're looking at it in that space across the different fields.
Okay, so adopt DOME being a strong recommendation. And then I agree that journals and funders have a key role to play in being a driver for promoting fair data practices. So this has been a wonderful conversation. I think we could probably do this all day, but we are coming up to time. So I would like to say a sincere thank you to our presenters and to all of you for a fantastic and thought-provoking session. We've covered a lot. We've gone from ensuring reproducibility in complex AI models to ethical and technical challenges associated with using data in healthcare and the life sciences, as well as many other important topics. So as we've seen, data is not just the fuel for AI, it's also in many ways the foundation for trust, equity, and meaningful impact. And I hope that today's session sparked some ideas and perhaps some future collaborations, which I think we saw in the chat. So thanks again to everybody for joining us, and please enjoy the rest of RDA Plenary 24. Thank you.